The first 100 days of the Trump administration have been an absolute whirlwind of chaos, confusion, and frankly, also fear in the scientific community. Every day, it's something new, it's something different, it's almost endless. But as a news staff, we've sort of focused on kind of three broad areas. One is the impact on the scientific workforce, both folks who work in the federal government, but also scientists who are supported by federal money. There's no question that this administration has acted much more aggressively to reduce the size of the federal workforce than almost any previous administration.
Back in February, when we saw the first federal workforce cuts, they really went across the board. Within HHS, there's the National Institutes of Health, CDC, and FDA. All of them saw cuts. And then also at a lot of the land management agencies, USGS, Forest Service. The workers that were cut in this initial round were probationary workers. So these were workers who, in general, had been at their agency in their current position for less than 1 or 2 years. Since those initial probationary firings, there has been a lot of back and forth. Some of them have gotten their jobs back, some of them have not, and are either still in limbo or are trying to figure out what their next steps are. After the probationary firings, we have seen extensive rifts or reductions in force across various agencies. This is the more structured, regulated way that federal employees are able to be removed from their posts. A lot of the folks who lost their jobs have been shocked and devastated. We've heard people say, these were their dream jobs that they lost. Outside the federal workforce, we have researchers at institutions across the country who rely on federal funding and who are really struggling amidst all of the uncertainty and the grant cancellations. Incoming graduate cohorts have been severely limited, and even offers of admission have been rescinded. I think the impacts of the current climate are certainly going to have a huge effect on the early career researchers, the trainees. There certainly are some folks who are thinking much more seriously about leaving research. At the same time, I'm also seeing a lot of determination. There are a lot of folks who want to continue pushing through. One of the other elements that's really making the community concerned about the next generation are cuts that we've been seeing to a lot of training programs. We know that diversity of viewpoints is crucial for advancing scientific knowledge, that inclusion benefits everyone. I think for many of the researchers from the underrepresented groups, it's just been like a slap in the face to see a lot of that support retracted from not only the administration, but the scientific societies that have, rewritten some of their websites or canceled DEI-related programs. I just don't want to lose track of the real human impact that this is taking on the research community.
A second kind of broad area is what's going on in biomedical research, which is the largest area of spending by the federal government in science and has been disproportionately affected. The nature of some of the executive orders meant that NIH in particular was hit hard because the administration didn't want to fund research into diversity, equity, and inclusion, LGBTQ issues.
NIH is the largest funder of research in the United States and the largest funder of biomedical research in the world. Most of its budget goes out to universities across the country as grants to fund research there, but NIH also has a really large research program on its campus. So I was on the NIH campus last week talking to NIH's in-house researchers. It was very grim. They're feeling under assault in many ways. This recent RIF was getting rid of support staff like people who work in purchasing offices or HR or communications or IT. And so people told me that they can't travel now because there's too much lead time is needed to get the trip approved. They can't buy things, reagents, for example, because there's nobody to process their order. Along with this White House proposal to cut the budget of NIH pretty dramatically, they also want to reorganize it. There are now 25 institutes and centers, and the White House has proposed collapsing them into 8 and getting rid of at least 4 centers that study things like minority health and nursing, and they're not doing international research. So HHS has said this is all part of a move towards efficiency and that they're going to centralize things like communications and purchasing, but they did not have a plan in place before these cuts. The grants we talked about before that go out to academic researchers across the country, the Trump administration, several agencies announced that they were going to suspend $400 million in federal grants to Columbia because they wanted changes in Columbia's policies towards protesters who were very active on the campus last year, protesting about Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Meanwhile, this is started to happen at other major research universities like Harvard and University of Pennsylvania. There's a big list. If the university where it's happening does not find some money to keep the grant going or the project, then they may have to shut down and they may have to lay off staff. At Columbia, the grants that were stopped, some of them did involve DEI or some of the sort of taboo topics, but at Harvard, some of the ones that have been in the news had nothing to do with the executive orders or those topics. They were infectious disease research, I think studying the effects of radiation on the body. So yeah, they had nothing to do with diversity or transgender research.
The third area, which was one of the first areas to feel the major impacts, was global health. How the United States supports all kinds of health activities all around the world. One of the first pieces of evidence we saw of DOGE's influence was at the U.S. Agency for International Development, where Elon Musk famously announced on Twitter that they were going to feed the agency into a wood chipper. And indeed, that's pretty much what they did. They canceled most of the contracts, they fired most of the staff, they hollowed out the agency, where it basically exists in name only at this point.
I think nobody really expected the onslaught that we've seen the last 3 months. It's completely beyond what people expected to happen. This began in January with the so-called stop work orders. That's caused a lot of confusion and also a very immediate impact on the ground. People were suddenly without their medications. Clinical trials were halted, which people have pointed out is an unethical thing to do. USAID has been very important in global health. They spend on a vast variety of diseases, a massive program for HIV/AIDS, for malaria, tuberculosis, and then for many smaller diseases, and then things like pandemic prevention, malnutrition. Many programs have already been ended. People have to close down offices. People have modeled what this would mean for global health. And one recent preprint said there could be 25 million deaths in the next 15 years because of diseases like HIV, malaria, tuberculosis, as a result of these cuts. We had a story also about a comment in Nature that said that there could be about 370,000 deaths from malnutrition. So the impact is really, really severe. Whenever there's a famine, you see the planes landing, you see photos of big bags of food with the USAID logo on it and the slogan, "From the American People." That was a powerful symbol of America's benevolence, if you will. And people see that being destroyed. Also, grants have been altered or cancelled within the National Institutes of Health. NIH has now ended South Africa's participation in some clinical trial networks for HIV/AIDS. South Africa is the country with the largest number of people living with HIV in the world, but it's also a country with a very solid research infrastructure. By ending that collaboration, NIH is depriving itself of a very important opportunity for research. Many organizations working in global health are looking for other funders, but the answer is there aren't many. European countries are already cutting down on foreign aid as well. So we're seeing sort of a global retreat almost from global health.
So now that we're getting through the first 100 days, the newsroom is beginning to think about what's going to come next. And we're really looking at a couple of big issues that are on the horizon. The first is going to be what the White House requests for the 2026 budget. They're expected to make that request in coming weeks. And we already know at some research agencies, they are going to ask Congress to make massive budget cuts. A second thing we're watching is the results of all these lawsuits. There are dozens and dozens of them, and we don't know where those are going to land yet. And that really brings us to the last big question, which is hovering over all of this. Does this administration mark the end of what has essentially been a 75-year compact between the federal government and the research community. And essentially, that compact said the government will take responsibility for funding basic research that may have no obvious application, that's curiosity-driven. And we're going to do that mostly at universities. It's produced tremendous innovation, huge amount of gross domestic product. But the actions of this administration suggest that that compact is at minimum eroding and may be completely reconfigured in the years to come.